ASP listeners, you can get 50% off your first order of CS Instant Coffee by using the code ADVENTURE. Check them out. They've been a supporter of the show for a while, so it would really mean a lot if you went and supported them. Thank you.
And we're literally climbing, and I see all this surf on the horizon, and my Thai buddy Joey's, I'm like, what's all that surf? I didn't think you guys got surf here. He's like, we don't.
This is the Adventure Sports Podcast, where we hear stories of adventure from every corner of the planet. We interview all sorts of folks who are using their sport to explore the world around them and give you the inspiration you need to get out there and have some fun. This is kind of a new format for us. This interview, as you probably heard in the intro, is a better quality for the guest. That's because Aaron and I actually interviewed each other together at the House of Pod in Denver, which is like a podcast studio. But Aaron ended up writing about us late last year in the Telegraph, and he got in touch, and we just so happened to be near each other here in the Denver area, so we decided to meet up and do an episode. So Aaron, thank you so much for suggesting that and getting it set up, and it was a blast to be face to face with a guest and someone who has so many accolades and was so fun to talk to. And our conversation kind of goes all over the place. We talk about travel writing, we talk about some of his stories and adventures, talk about fatherhood a little bit and our careers, and hope you enjoy the interview. But Aaron is an award-winning travel writer. He's written for the Times of London, National Geographic. He's done some documentary stuff for National Geographic. He's written 2 books. One is about the 50 greatest wonders of the world, and the other one is about the 50 greatest national parks in the world. So both just incredible projects talking about the most amazing things literally on the planet. And in 2014 and 2017, Aaron was the British Guild of Travel Writers Travel Writer of the Year, which is a pretty incredible accomplishment that he had twice. So it was a huge honor to talk to him. If you'd like to learn more about him, he'll mention this later in the show, but I would just want to plug it now. He has a podcast called Armchair Explorer that basically interviews explorers and adventurers about their most incredible story, like their single most favorite story. And so it's really condensed. It's just amazing. And you can find out more about that by, searching on whatever podcast app you use or going to armchair-explorer.com. But I don't think this will be the last time we have him on, because he's very poetic in the way he talks. So it was just so much fun. So Aaron, thanks again, and I hope y'all enjoy. I don't know who's welcoming who because I feel like I'm in your house.
Well, welcome to your own podcast, Mason.
Yeah,
thanks for having me.
So welcome, Aaron. I shared a few around Christmas time when we were on in the Telegraph, and I talked about that, and that was awesome. And Aaron, you were the one that made that happen. So that's kind of where we met and how we built our relationship. But from there, we started emailing and realized, oh, we're in the same area. I don't know who realized it first, but you said Louisville?
Yeah,
okay.
Louisville.
All right. So, and I'm in Lakewood, which is, basically greater area of Denver, Boulder area. So we just figured let's meet up and do an interview. And so, we've actually never done a live interview on Adventure Sports Podcast. We've had the ability to a couple times, maybe like 5 times overall, but everyone else we ever interview is in Papua New Guinea or the UK or Africa somewhere. So it's pretty hard to actually find a place where or a guest where you're physically close enough to meet up. And so this has been, I have the ability to do it now, but not before. So this is a first for us.
This is nice, man. It's nice to do a face by face, and thank you for dropping off some of your beer, by the way, as well.
Yeah,
so I may, if you hear it halfway through, that's just me enjoying sampling your brews.
Oh man, well I recommend drinking it cold, but that's just me. My dad drinks it warm. So But Aaron, you are you originally from the UK or Ireland, or what is it for you?
Yeah, actually, I was born in the States. My mom's American, but my dad's English, and we moved out to England when I was a little kid. So I basically grew up in Brighton, England, on the south coast, and then did my tenants in London for a number of years, and then just ran away to the Rocky Mountains of Colorado.
Oh man! Well, what brought you? Why the Rockies in Colorado?
It's funny. We kind of put. It was actually an adventure in its own self because. When I was about 30, I quit my job. I had a big kind of London job and quit it on a kind of, I don't know what you call the 30-year-old. It's not quite your midlife crisis. It's like your pre-midlife crisis.
It's like third of the way.
I'm having as many as I can get, as many as they'll let me, And I was like, no, I can't do this city life. I can't do this this big stressful job. And I always wanted to be a writer, so I was like, right, I'm just going to quit my job and be a writer. And for about 6 months, I was just trying to get published, and it wasn't happening. And then finally, I got this great job, and it's one of the stories I was hoping to tell you later, but. That led to me working for some different newspapers and magazines in the UK, and eventually getting the job to come over to America and cover some North American travel. So I came over as a kind of freelancer working for the London Times and National Geographic Traveller, and basically the idea was to spend 3 years with my little family traveling around the States and writing and exploring and having adventures. But we got stuck in Colorado. We were gonna move to Boulder, Colorado, and then we saw the property prices and we moved just outside instead.
Yeah, you'll save quite a few lifetimes of work.
Yeah, but it's a beautiful place, man. I love Colorado, and I love this part of America. It's so big and wild and vast, and coming from a country that's small and crowded, it just feels so liberating and so full of adventure. And it's always been my dream to run away to the mountains, and I got as far as the foothills and the Front Range. So, but that's close enough for me.
So you mentioned 3 years kind of commitment with you and your family in the States.
Yeah,
that sounds like an amazing opportunity.
It was unbelievable, and I mean, just to the flexibility to do a job where you just kind of work from your laptop is amazing. And we had young kids before they were going into school, and we had that flexibility, so we wanted to go on that big life adventure and just live out our dreams. We had that thing where it's like when your kid's about 3 or 4, you look over on the horizon, you think, God, they're going to enter school soon, and then it's just game over, Yeah. So it's like where you begin that process is kind of starting to put your roots down a little bit. And so we were like, God, before we do that, let's go and see some more of the world. And my wife Jill and I have always been kind of backpackers, and we wanted to do some of that with the kids. It's a little different with the kids, but it's so magical to show them the world and share the world with them.
That's awesome. So you traveled around the U.S., you got stuck in Colorado. Is there any sort of, because I know here in the States, it's like going west is the thing to do. Is there anything like that in the U.K.? Is there a region, maybe like the Lake District? I don't know. I really don't know much. That's like the only place. Or is it somewhere else? It's very kind of segregated in some ways. So my wife and I shouldn't get on. She's from the northeast of Scotland, which is as far as she can go, and I'm from the south of England. So in theory, she's supposed to hate me, but we've managed to figure it out. But there really isn't the same thing, And I've done a bunch of stories and trips about the West, and I think that's one of the things that always really captures me about it, is that just that sense of boundlessness. I did a story about wild Mustang horses in Nevada, and this ranch had been set up to kind of rescue these horses, and there was this moment where we were just riding along with the herd, and then they started galloping, and they're just kicking up this huge dust storm around us, and we had the Ghost Chute Mountains are in the distance, just kind of dripped in snow, and I was like, man, this is it. This is the West. This is a scene that has been
been looked at by so many different people for over hundreds of years, and I just felt kind of connected to that, and I feel like that's what this part of the world gives you. It gives you that space, it gives you that sense of freedom and adventure, and I don't think you get that in Europe. You get, not everywhere anyway, I think you get history and you get depth and you get some other things like that, culture, but you don't get that kind of boundless, limitless freedom that you get out here in the West, and that's just such a catalyst for adventure, such an inspiration for me, and so that's part of the reason why we got stuck, and it's interesting too, because it's, that kind of Wild West heritage is really alive in Colorado, and but it's not that far away. It feels like it is, but actually, you go up into Silverton or somewhere like that where it's like dirt roads, and and you think about it, and you're like, God, man, that's only a few generations away. Like back home in England, they were clinking teacups and waltzing, and it was still completely wild here and untouched. And I think because of that, that newness, that freshness to it, it has a different feel to it. I really feel like different landscapes and different areas have a feel, like almost an emotional feel to them, as well as the way that they look. And I always try and capture that a little bit, is to try and, how does a place feel? It just like intuitively, instinctively. And I think here for me, it just feels still kind of untapped and wild. And the mountains always have that special energy anyway. They're so big, they're so vast and unexplored and wild, and I always grew up by the ocean, and I miss the ocean in some ways, but the mountains win for me. The mountains have that special energy, which always makes me feel good.
So, man, I can't tell you how much I agree. The West I've never been anywhere like it. Been a lot of places in this world. There's something about I'm biased, but the American West, it's It's a recent history, but also an ancient history, because the history, the natives, it was unchanging for so long, and there is a specialness about it and just a vastness. Yeah. I remember doing the Colorado Trail one time, and my friend he just toured all of New Zealand on bicycle, north to south.
Yep,
or north to south, yeah. And we did the Colorado Trail, which starts in Durango and goes all the way to Denver pretty much. And he said, this is better. This is because of it just never ends. He goes, I feel like I could cross a pass or two and I'm on the other side of the island, right, laterally. Yeah. But he's like, here it's 500 miles wide of just peak after peak after peak after peak. And in Colorado, in a way, is small compared to other parts of the West. And it's just like one little section. And I can't agree with you more. So you mentioned you try to capture it. How do you capture it? You're still writing about it, correct?
Yeah, I'm still a travel writer, and we met through the podcasting thing. I started a podcast too, and I love talking about adventure as much as I love writing about it. But I think whichever format you're doing that, travel and adventure for me is more than just the kind of practical nuts and bolts of how to do something or what you see. It's also about how you take it in, how it makes you feel, how it changes you, and that's like the kind of deeper side of adventure. And I think you can always allude to that. A good example. So I took last year, one of the best trips I did last year. I went down the route of parks in Chilean Patagonia, which is like it's a new. They've basically linked together 3 long distance road trips to create this new mega road trip. It's like the ultimate road trip in the world, more than 1,000 miles from Puerto Montt all the way down to the Cape. Most of it just on dirt roads, passing through. I think it's like 17 national parks. It's now the largest contiguous area of protected wilderness on the planet. And it's so wild and so untouched. And it was an amazing trip. But at the end of it, we literally reached the end of the road for the northern section of it in this village of Tortel. And the road literally ends there. And we got a boat, just a guy with a little boat, took us to the southern ice field. And we're surrounded by these amazing pale blue icebergs and just no one, absolute no one. And this guy's grown up, he's in his 50s and he's grown up on these waters his whole life. And he's like, I think the icebergs are parting a little bit and I think we can get closer. Do you want to go in he brought this kind of rubber dinghy with him and he's like, we can go closer. And so we kind of like wove through this maze of icebergs. And then he's like, I think we can land there, and we landed on this little peninsula with this huge waterfall coming down, and we hiked up this hill, and then there was the Jorge Montt glacier just suddenly in front of us, just like glimmering like stars. And he looked at me and he's like, I've never been here before. And you think, God, I bet no one has, It's like,
wow, yeah.
And it feels different because of that. It feels... There's a kind of wilderness. I mean, I love national parks. I've written a book about national parks. I absolutely adore them. And I think America does national parks incredibly well, but they're managed for our recreation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a different feeling to that, to being in the true wilderness. And when I stood in that place looking out at those icebergs and that glacier, and, we'd been there for 2 days and not seen another soul, and that emptiness, there's something about that emptiness of the true wilderness that really just fills your soul up.
What do you think that is? Like, why as humans do we crave that? You know what I'm saying?
I think it's where we come from. I think that our brains have evolved. 99.9% of human evolution has been in the outdoors, right?
Yeah, it's true.
Our bed has been the forest, and our blanket has been the stars, and that's how our brains have evolved. And so we're not mentally used to this kind of, especially urban environment. We're not used to this fast-paced thinking that we have to do with social media and all that kind of stuff. And one of the things that I always try and talk about and write about whenever I can is something called what I call the wonder deficit. And I think that we have a wonder deficit in our life. And one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about sharing adventure and exploration is I think that wonder is something that's, truly what makes us human and what makes life worth living. And when we empty ourselves, and I think great nature can do that, when we empty ourselves, we allow that wonder in. And actually, there's some really interesting science and psychology about that too, where that they think that that maybe what we're experiencing in the presence of great wonder, when we see that sunrise over the Grand Canyon, or we look out in the middle of the Alaskan Range and look up at the middle of the night and we see the northern lights just dancing across the sky. We are so overwhelmed, our mind becomes so overwhelmed with that experience that it actually kind of just dissolves our ego. And for just a second, we see the world as it really is without having to look through the veil of our own insecurities and ego and petty things that we can't usually drop.
Let's take a quick break from one of our sponsors. If you were to guess on average how many days people in the U.S. have to wait to see a doctor, what would you say? Well, Americans have to wait around 29 days to see a doctor in major U.S. cities. And if you're dealing with a condition like erectile dysfunction, you'll want treatment ASAP. That's why our friends at Roman have spent years building a digital platform that can connect you with a doctor licensed in your state, all from the comfort of your own home. Roman makes it convenient to get treatment you need and on your schedule. So just grab your phone or computer, complete a free online visit, and you'll hear back from a U.S. licensed physician within 24 hours. And if the doctor decides that treatment is right for you, Roman's Pharmacy can ship your medication to you with free 2-day shipping. You also get free unlimited follow-ups with your doctor anytime you have questions or want to adjust your treatment plan. With Roman, there are no commitments and you can cancel anytime. So if you're struggling with ED, go to getroman.com/ASP for a free online visit and free 2-day shipping. That's getroman.com/ASP for a free online visit and free 2-day shipping. Link is in the show notes. Now back to the episode. Wow. So you sound more like a travel poet than a travel writer.
That's awesome. I might steal that, man. Thank you.
That was good. I was like, Jesus, this is right out of a book. But I think you're right. It's almost like we get to just let go of ourselves.
Yep.
Social media.
Yep.
Let go of just thinking about anything. And I tell you, when you come to, when you're in those moments, I know everyone out there listening has had those moments, whether it's a drive or just where you forget and say, wow. I find those moments bittersweet now because I know they're not going to last that long.
Yeah.
And I have to go back and, pay bills or whatever I got to do, in normal life. And those little moments are so precious. Sometimes I just walk out on my porch at night. Like the other night I did that. And, I go around, there's the dog food thing. There's, all this stuff on the porch, and you just look up at the stars and think, those are so far away. This can be one of those moments for me. Yep. It doesn't have to be, when I'm in the backcountry Yosemite, because I can't do that every day,
That's right.
But I have to find that today. If I need that after a long day of work, I need to find that, and I'm not going to go, the roads are covered with ice or whatever. I can't go for a drive. I'll just go out there and look, and that can do that now. But
I think that's right. And I think that's what it's all about. It's like, there's, not everyone's able. I feel super lucky and blessed to have been able to explore the world, but not everyone can do that, and that shouldn't mean that people can't be exposed to that kind of wonder, because really it's all around us, like you say, and it's easier to find and sense in places like Yosemite, which are just mind-blowingly unbelievable. But like you say, it's those little moments where you see the stars, or it's that. It's that little moment. Like I wake up early, and I, sometimes I'll look out my window and I'll just see, for just a second, like maybe just a minute, the perfect color of sunrise. And if you can just take 10 seconds to just breathe that in, that'll change your whole day. And it's interesting what you said too, because I've coined this phrase. I'm trying to get this idea off the ground called the wonderist, right? Which is because if you're a collector of anything, whatever that is that ends in ist, like I can't remember what the different words are, but you're a stamp collector, it's a somethingist. You're a box collector, it's a somethingist. So I want to be a wonderist. I want to collect wonder. I want to go around the world and I want to collect snapshots and moments of wonder, because those are things that you can keep with you. Okay, that's something that they're fleeting in a sense, but they're also the only thing that you really can keep, because it really goes in deep, and I do believe that that it fills you up, and it has the capacity and the power to change you. And I think that's something that's a way we can twist some of this kind of modern life interest stroke obsession with sharing our experiences and having experiences. I think it's great in many ways that we're moving from a kind of consumerist culture to an experience-driven culture, right? Where there's something more real and authentic about that. We don't need more things to make us happy, but maybe we do need great experiences. But those experiences don't have to be related to ego and status and like how many likes we get. Those things can also be related to pure wonder and moments of mindfulness. And so we can go about our lives and want to experience all these great things and want to share them with all our friends. But underneath that, we can have a more deeper sense of how each one of those things is enlightening us in a small way, and maybe sometimes in a big way too.
Have you always thought that way, or was it different younger?
Definitely different younger. I mean, there's different phases of your life, isn't there? And I feel like I've always been driven and connected to nature and the outdoors, and in a really profound way. But it's hard to articulate those feelings. I think it's sometimes like bigger ideas that need time to kind of ferment in your brain, and so sometimes when you're younger, you can feel those things, but they're hard to articulate, even kind of emotionally in your own thoughts. And so, but if you keep bubbling them up inside, and then eventually they come out one way or the other, whether it's an article or an adventure sports podcast.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It just seems like a really mature way of looking at experiences. And I'm sure being a dad for as long as you have, I'm sure you look at things differently. Like, does my kid really need another toy, or do we need to go somewhere? Yeah. Or go experience something, or go do something that maybe they've never done. And so, no, I think that's a great way of looking at it. We do have a lot of guests on this show that you can tell a difference between the young and the older adventurers. It's like the young ones are based on how cool does this sound to other people, and right. You can accuse me of that all day long.
Well, I guess we can all be guilty of that sometimes.
And then now it's like, what do I really want to do? Yeah, you know what I mean? And it might not be worthy of a documentary, but it does it for me. Yep. You know what I mean? Like it's more pure adventure than maybe this was, that was so marketable when I was in my 20s. But speaking of adventures, I know you've done a lot of interesting things through your work. Is there anything in particular that sticks out to you? I know we talked about there was this pub crawl you did.
Well, that seems so shallow to go to that now, doesn't it? I was like, hey, let's talk about a 100-mile pub crawl I did, because that sounds so cool. No,
it's
actually that was my first real job, and there's a good story behind that. But I wanted to actually just relate it to what we're talking about.
Yeah.
What kind of jumps to mind is there's a trip I did. There's a long distance footpath in Japan called the Kumano-Kodo, and it's been walked by like emperors and pilgrims and peasants for more than 1,000 years, and it goes through the Kii Mountains, the Kii Peninsula of Japan, which is just south of Kyoto. Really beautiful place. But in these mountains, there's a group called the Shugendo Monks, right? And if you've ever seen those videos where there's these monks meditating under freezing waterfalls and performing these superhuman feats, these are those guys, right? And what's so interesting about them and related to what we're talking about is that they believe it's kind of a cross between Japanese Shintoism, which is like paganism, connection to earth and nature, and traditional Buddhism, which is like enlightenment of the mind. And it's a fusion of those two things. So they believe that enlightenment is attained not through distancing yourself from the world and meditating, but through absolute immersion in the natural world. And so what they do is they do these really crazy kind of long distance hikes and feats of endurance, like meditating under these waterfalls, and they really believe that by just immersing themselves in, they don't say the word adventure, but that's how they kind of live their life, in the natural world in an active way. They're able to kind of push out many of those kind of day-to-day thoughts, and then just listen and hear what they perceive as the truth, right? And so I walked this footpath. I was one of the first people to walk it without a guide, and it was absolutely beautiful. It's hard too, like it's very steep, but there's these beautiful paths through the mountains, and you stay in these beautiful little traditional guest houses along the way, and you arrive, and there are, like, I'm not even joking, like 15-course sushi dinners waiting for you.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Just because it's this thing called I think it's called taike. I'll have to look it up, but you'll have to put it in the show notes. But it's this idea of using all your senses, right? So, and one of those is taste, and they give you all these tastes and the most delicious food, and they have these natural hot springs that you go swim in at the end of the day, and it's just the most peaceful, incredible, amazing thing. And right at the end of this like 5-day hike, I rounded the corner, and there was an actual Shugendo monk there, and he spoke a little English, and we sat down and we started talking. And the legends of these Shugendo monks, like if you ever watch those kung fu movies where people are like flying up Matrix style and like spinning around forever and doing those incredible feats, those all come from like ancient Japanese legends of the Shugendo monks, that they believed that through this nature immersion they were given these superpowers, right? So I said to him, what's your superpower? And he leaned in and he said, I can listen to people's hearts and know how to help them.
Oh, man.
Isn't that like the best superpower you've ever heard of?
It's absolutely a superpower too in today's world. I was going to ask, what do you ask a monk when you come across them on a trail?
I know, right? What's your superpower?
Yeah,
apparently?
what's your that is too good of an answer.
Yeah, right. It's so cool. And he actually was one of the guys that so the Nachi-Otaki is the sacred waterfall that they build all their shrines around it and temples around at the end of this hike. And this is the mountains, and it's Japan, and it's freezing in winter. And if you or I were to go into this waterfall, we'd probably last a couple of minutes and get hypothermia. But he explained to me that he's able to go in, and through meditation and through this power he's attained through this nature immersion, he's able to go in and control his body temperature enough that he can meditate under there for up to 45 minutes under this freezing water. And there's videos of similar monks doing that. So there's a real physiological truth to that too, right? Like he is actually getting a superpower or a control over his body in a way. I don't know if he can fly through the trees like, Crouching Tiger style, but maybe he didn't show me that. That's what I should have asked, right?
He's not going to show you that. Not just some outsider.
That would be the last thing I see, wouldn't it?
Yes. You turned around, he was gone. That's what happened.
Yeah, exactly.
He jumped through the trees. That's too cool.
Yeah.
So I mean, gosh. So if you can't have those experiences all the time, what do you do with your demanding life? I don't even know what direction we're going here, but it's just, I love stories like that. Stories are just what this whole show's about, of course. And I feel like for a lot of us, the stories that we hold on to or that we tell and are most proud of there can be quite a long time between a new iteration or a new story, if that makes sense. And I don't know if you feel that way sometimes, but for me, it's definitely like that. And I never want to be one of those people that holds on to something they did so long ago, and there's nothing new they've done since. Mm-hmm. And personally, it's just always a fascination to me.
Stories are like a lot of people think that stories are what actually defines us as human beings, right? Like there's that we're the only animal that's capable of telling stories in order that we all believe and follow similar paths and work together. And if you go to any culture at any time in the world, storytelling has been an important part of that. So for me it's all about stories and inspiring each other with our stories, right? And I think every time that we tell those stories that uplift and inspire, we're making the world a little bit of a better place in a small way, And that's what you're doing with your show here too. I think is I love listening to it. I'm honored to be on it. I love listening to your show, and I love being transported away to these great adventures that people are doing, and that's what I'm trying to do too. Is to we live in dark times, but the world is still an incredibly amazing and wonderful place, and it's really important to remember that we're a part of that amazingness. We're not separate from that amazingness. We're intrinsically a part of that amazingness. And I think when we explore the world and we begin to understand that more deeply, I think that when you climb a mountain and you stand on top of that mountain, I've done some things where, like, for example, I did this thing called cliff camping. You're a climber, right? So this won't be too...
I've climbed. I've climbed. I wouldn't call myself a climber, but yeah.
I was really into climbing for a while, so I didn't think this would scare me, but I did this thing called cliff camping, which, did you know about cliff camping? So it ended up scaring the hell out of me. For people that don't know what that is, it's basically like taking kind of mere mortals, non kind of mountain goats or mountaineers onto sheer cliff faces and spending the night on a portaledge, which are those like flimsy things that rock climbers take up on big wall ascents to spend the night on. And I had this kind of crazy experience doing it, involving, nearly getting hit by a lightning strike, having to do like an emergency abseil. We then hiked up the back of this mountain. I had to jump over like a 3-foot, it was almost like a crevasse. It was a 3-foot gap between these two cliffs. It was like the hardest thing I've ever done. Like if you were on ground level in the light, I'd do it backwards, right?
Yeah,
but
right.
up there, it was, but I was with this guy. He was like my guide taking me up. His name's Buster Jessic. This is up in Estes Park in Rocky Mountain near us. And he's like the James Bond of rock climbing. He just makes everything look good about it and easy. So he's like hopping over it which way. Anyway, we get over this thing and then we have to abseil rappel down the cliff face to reach the portaledge that way via rappel. And at one point on this rappel, he had gone first, and he'd gone on kind of over an overhang, and then I was kind of coming down on my own, and it was dark, and the wind was kicking up, and all I could see was the light of my head torch, and then I was surrounded by this cliff and this darkness, and it was it was intense, but I was like, wow, I felt so like privileged to be there, because how many people see this? How many people see this cliff or this mountain from this perspective? And that's real connection, right? And it's one thing to look at it from a car window or from from a viewpoint, but to really jump headfirst in is a completely different experience. And then, you know, I had a bad night. I for whatever reason, I just like intense vertigo all night long. It was just spinning me backwards. And, you know, at one point I had to take a pee, and it was like the worst pee I ever had to take. Like extreme sleeping is one thing, but extreme peeing, I mean, it was like the most, it was like, oh my God. And then a storm came over. It was like, the whole thing was really, really intense. But then the dawn broke and sunrise kind of flooded this whole valley with color. And it was so beautiful. And we were looking down and we saw these like lights coming on in Estes Park, people like turning their lights on and waking up and making coffee and driving off in their car to work. And you know, and Buster turned to me and he said, look at them. Don't you feel sorry for them? They spend their whole life there and they don't know what it's like to be here. They don't know what this feels like. They don't know what this looks like. And I think that's what it's all about. It's like, it's worth pushing yourself through those moments of fear to get to that point of realization and that point of, you know, that privilege of to see something, to see a landscape from that unique and privileged position that very few people see. And I think that does change you in some way. And when I got to, I swore I would never do it again. And when I got to the bottom, I sort of kissed the ground Hollywood style. Like, so all night long I said, when I get to the bottom, I'm going to kiss the ground Hollywood style. And I did it. But then I was like, you know what? Damn, I might go up again. That was good, you know, and that's what happens too, isn't it?
That is the effect, the adventure effect, man. You hate it during the time. I can't tell you how many trips I've wanted to quit.
Right.
I'm like, this is awful. You get down and you're like, that is going on my resume.
Best time I ever had.
That is the best thing I've ever done. And
absolutely.
now that's interesting that your buddy brought that up or said that, you know, do you feel sorry for them? And, you know, I know you're the same way. We've had the privilege of being in some pretty incredible places and do some pretty incredible things. And I don't know about you, but when I go to those places, I meet a lot of people that don't seem to know what's around them. Yeah. And some of the most adventurous people, some of the people that I would say are my favorite guests that have ever been on the show, or even my best friends who I try to emulate a lot, they don't live in the most remarkable places. Like I used to live in Yosemite Valley.
Oh, wow.
And
beautiful.
Used to live and work there. And I knew people, there's Yosemite Falls there, which is, you know, 2,500 feet, and you hear it at night. Like it's so loud. It'll keep you up at night. It's like a fan being on anywhere in the valley, just because it ricochets the noise. You know, just it's amazing acoustics. But there were people I worked with that didn't know if the waterfall was not running like it's a faucet, but you know what I mean. Like water was flowing, right? Because for a lot of the year it's dry. Right. There were people that didn't even know because they never took the time to literally, all it was look up. Yeah. That's it. They were like, I would say, did you see the falls this morning? They're like, no, I didn't. I'm like, are you kidding me? It was, you get mist on your face coming into work from
your
it.
Face is actually wet from it.
And they had no idea because it was so far from what they were thinking about in their mind. And so for those people down in Estes that you guys were looking down, there's a very real chance that, you know, when you get used to something like that, you just don't, you might not, you just take it for granted. Yeah. I see it here in Colorado all the time.
All the time, yep.
I figured moving here, it's like, oh, everyone's going to be adventurous, but you still have to look for it.
Yeah.
Just like I had to look for it there, just like how I had to look for it home in Florida. It's there, but you have to find it. And so I just want to encourage anyone out there listening that, you know, maybe you feel like you're not in an adventurous place in life, maybe location wise, maybe a stage of life. You know, we're both dads, so, you know, that can definitely take a hit.
That's
on
a big adventure in itself.
Yeah, for sure. And in a lot of ways it feels like I can't get out as much, but it really isn't true. You know what I mean? And it really is how you look at it and what you decide to do. You know, those people live right there. They could go up there. You know, maybe they couldn't do that. They could do something around there. Yep. And so it really is starting exactly where you are.
And to notice it. And I like what you said that. And also just, you know, if you are someone that notices that and loves that and gets that, then, you know, and I'm sure that everyone that's listening to this show is one of those people. It's about sharing that, it's like I feel like if everyone just shared their passion, the world would be a better place. And if your passion is the outdoors, and then someone hasn't yet woken up to that beautiful thing yet, then it's all just about sharing that in whichever way you want,
Yeah.
And I think that's what it's all about for me, man. It's just like sharing that amazingness and hoping to inspire other people to get out there.
So
pub crawls.
Yeah. Yeah. Time for a quick message break. CS Instant Coffee is definitely the best instant coffee I've ever had. In fact, just out of convenience and how good it tastes, I decided for the last year I've been taking it on every single adventure I go on, from backpacking to bike tours, just from convenience sake. It's really high quality, and it keeps me from having to take a bunch of other equipment out in the woods. But it's not just for going out on adventures. My wife actually takes some to work every single day with her. She takes a couple packs to refill her coffee mug as a teacher. She doesn't have a ton of time to have to make fresh coffee all the time, so she just needs a little hot water, can pour the coffee in, and she's ready to go for her next class and not waste a lot of time. So if you're crunched for time in your job, I would definitely suggest giving it a shot, because they have been huge supporters of the show for the last year, and I really appreciate everything they've done for us, and it would mean a lot to me to go support them. So if you're interested, go to csinstant.coffee and support those who are supporting the show. It would go a long way. Thank you. All right, let's get back to the episode. Yeah,
plus beer,
absolutely. So, I was going to ask, how do you share it? Is it, how do you share it?
Well,
because I know we've talked about, I know you do the podcast, you write, but
yeah.
Is that primarily what you do?
Yeah, I'm lucky, I guess, that I can do that through my job. But it's a good question. I think that our general interactions with people, I think, are one of the biggest ways we can make an influence on the world. Talk about being a dad. I think that's the biggest influence that you'll have in life, no matter probably what you do. And so it's like inspiring your kids and just, it's not always easy, I mean, it's not something like I've just kind of wake up zen and I'm like, hey, I'm just going to go out and inspire people. I get stressed, I get overworked, I get overwhelmed, like everyone else. I think it's just about trying to come back and connect to that part and remember what's really, really important, I had a really crazy experience. I wasn't going to talk about this, but I had a really crazy experience when I was younger. In my 20s, I was in Thailand when the tsunami hit. And the 2004 tsunami, and it was the most crazy story of luck you'll probably ever hear. But I think that really made me think about life and death and other things like that differently. And I think from that moment on, I started to really try and pursue what was important to me personally. Like, I feel like the point of life is one-fold subjective, to be happy and to enjoy it, and two-fold objective, to make it the world, just to leave it a little bit better than you left it, in whichever way in whichever way your kind of skills and passion interact with that. But the but the tsunami story, it was we were backpacking around Thailand, and we were actually in a place called Tonsai rock climbing, which is a really famous rock climbing place. Beautiful, like crags just coming out of the sea, loads of deep water soloing. Like, you could kayak out to these incredible, just like huge cliffs coming out of the sea, and just like tie your kayak up to the cliff, and then just like
free solo.
Free solo.
Fall right.
Yeah.
Oh man!
And the ocean's just like beautiful and warm. It's just the most beautiful place, and just like belaying on your bare feet on the beach, and it's really beautiful place. But what we were only kind of there by accident. We were going to go to a different island, and we met some people on the ferry over, and they're like, no, you got to check this place out, it's amazing. So we're like, okay. So we didn't go to this island called Koh Phi Phi, and we went to Tonsai instead. And then we wanted to stay on this beach called Railay Beach, and it was totally full up. So we had to go to this other beach, which is Tonsai Beach, and we wanted to get one of those little bungalows on the beach, but they were all booked up. So the only one we could get was right up in the mountains. So we were staying up there in the mountains, and it was, and we'd been kind of vegetarian the whole way, but my wife Jill was, is a meat eater from time to time, and it was Christmas Day, and they cooked this turkey, right? Yeah. And so she's like, and we'd planned to go diving the next day, and but they had the little guest house we were staying at gone to the trouble of cooking this turkey, and I was veggie. I'm like, so I can't eat it, and so she's like, it's okay, I'll eat it, not to be ungrateful. And as a result of her eating that, she got really bad food poisoning, and so the next day we didn't go diving. And everyone that went out in the water that day didn't come back, so we didn't go out diving.
Oh my God!
And I woke up and I was like, well, I'll go climbing instead. And I met up with my Thai buddy.
And you didn't know about the tsunami?
The tsunami hadn't hit yet.
Hadn't hit yet.
It's
okay.
gonna hit. It hit on Boxing Day, the day after Christmas.
Holy cow!
So she's stuck with food poisoning, and I meet up with my Thai buddy, and we go off climbing. And he's like, so you want to go to Eagle Wall over here? You want to go on and climb out one of those peninsula out to sea? And I'm like, I don't know. Let's go over there. Everyone that was climbing on Eagle Wall that day didn't make it. Everyone that went onto the other place did. And so we came out, and the place where I was climbing was like this peninsula that comes off Raleigh Beach, and beautiful kind of like multi-pitch crags going up it. And we're literally climbing, and I see all this surf on the horizon, and my Thai buddy Joey's, I'm like, what's all that surf? I didn't think you guys got surf here. And he's like, we don't. And we watched this wall of white water come, and there was like boats underneath us and come, and we couldn't really get perspective on how big it was, and until it sort of came, and there was like a sailboat underneath us, and I remember it just completely swallowed this sailboat, and then just swept Raleigh Beach away, it just covered the whole of Raleigh Beach. There was 3 sets of it, so we're stuck on this peninsula, and we're stuck there for a few hours, not knowing what to do, not knowing what's happened. This is like 2004. We didn't have like mobile phones and internet and whatever, so eventually we decide to just like run across this beach, and I'm trying to get back to Jill, right? And so we run across this beach, and there's like fishing boats in the trees and wreckage everywhere, and eventually we get back to the beach where Jill and I were, the place Jill and I were staying. All the places where we wanted to stay on Raleigh Beach, gone. All the places that we wanted to stay on the beach, gone. The only place that wasn't hit was the place on top of the mountain, which was the last place that we could get.
Oh my gosh!
And the island that we were supposed to go to was something like 70-80% casualties. So so through this whole set of fortuitous circumstances, we survived. But when I got there, Jill, all I found was a note saying, on top of the mountain, and come and find me. And so I was traipsing through the jungle for like 2 hours, and eventually I found this clearing, and Jill and about 50 other people had run to the top of this mountain. And for like 2 weeks we didn't know what had happened. We really didn't know what happened. And
what did you think?
Well, you know what? It was. We managed to get a signal briefly, and I remember I phoned my mom, and I was like, hey Mom, I don't know if this is like, if anything's happened, but we're all right. And then the signal died, and no one could get through for 2 weeks. And she was like, thank God you did that,
Because they would have not known.
They would have not known.
2 weeks.
And so they were
oh my gosh,
they were like, literally they were dropping, ferrying in rice packets and dropping stuff like that to us, and we were helping clear up and helping rebuild people's homes. And then, but it really, for a while there, got really obsessed with thinking about death, and what it means, and how fortuitous it is, like one decision versus another decision, life and death, and you can kind of spiral into that dark hole pretty easily. And I guess I still sometimes, from time to time, struggle with that. But ultimately, I think that I took a lot of learning from that too. And which was that, just to be really thankful and grateful every day, and to wake up and try and set that intention of like, what am I grateful for? What do I really want today to be about? And for me, one of those things is trying to share the beauty of the world with other people, and other things are my kids and my families and friends and all the things that for everyone. But whatever is that passion of yours, it's easy to get caught up in careers. It's easy to get caught up in money. And of course, money and career is important and part of life. But what are you grateful for? What are you going to wake up and sit at the end of the day and be grateful for? And I think if you write down every day what you're really grateful for, it very rarely has anything to do with career or money. It's always little moments of like that sunset, or like that, that moment you have with your child or your friend. Those are the moments that you're grateful for. So if you remember and try and set that intention, then life's a less stressful place.
That is a crazy story.
It's a crazy story, yeah.
I'm sure that, I'm a believer there's a handful of pivotal moments in most of our lives, like that we, in our old age, will look back on and say that was a big moment.
Yep.
I think there's usually less than 10 for most people, maybe less than 5. That had to be one for you.
Yeah.
Because, it wasn't just a moment. It seemed like a couple week experience altogether.
It was, yeah. And it was almost, in real time, real life, you don't always notice those moments. I think that, like, looking back, you think, oh yeah, that was. Yeah, sometimes I feel like in the quantum multiverse, like 90% of me didn't make it through that, and I'm just living out that 10%.
Okay.
But I'm grateful for that.
Oh man, that's that will definitely make you sit back and think about how you want to live your life when it was such an inconsequential decision, seemingly, of where you're going to climb that day or where you're going to spend the day. Does that affect you now?
Like, do I start thinking about, God, what decision am I going to make? No, I don't think. I think it's hard to live your life like that. Thankfully, I think it would be very hard if you had to. And I don't live my life like that. But I think the, without getting too deep, I think that the good thing about our mortality is that it makes every single day precious, and our culture is geared towards denying death and denying the reality of death, and in doing so we deny ourselves the real true preciousness of every day. And so sometimes it's good to face up to that. And actually, I think for a lot of people that are into adventure sports in maybe a less direct way, that you get that, right?
That's a good point. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, when you challenge yourself and you put yourself out there, and you have those moments, whether it's rock climbing or on a big bike trip, or find yourself somewhere you don't know and you don't know what to do. Those are real moments. And I think that can bring you back to that truth too.
I would love to know if that is really true or if it just sounds true, because I think I definitely spend more time talking and thinking about death than my family does.
Right.
And my mother especially does not like that. But I think it feels very natural.
Yeah.
Because, I have a bike touring background, and I can't tell you how many times a day a logging truck passes me this close. I had an RV snag my jacket one time down a pass in California, and I thought that was 3 inches from just wiping me out.
Yep.
And it's like you're faced with it all the time, and I'm sure different lines of work, or you don't have to be in it, but I think adventurous people probably do have a different relationship with mortality.
There's a really interesting book by a amazing writer, UK writer and journalist called George Monbiot, called Feral, which, like, going back to that sense of, like, when we were talking about connecting with our brain evolving to be in the outdoors and in the natural world. In this book, he kind of argues that our brains also evolved to be confronted with danger and peril and our own mortality on a more regular basis, and that we're not being fully human unless we embrace that in some way. And so he uses this word feral, which I love, as a means of just like shedding. I just imagine like just shedding these layers of civilization and society, and just getting out there, and just, it feels like taking off a heavy jacket you didn't know you were wearing, and then suddenly you're like, that moment when you're backpacking, you take off your backpack and you're just like, and you just lift up. It feels like that, and it's like, I think that's what that's all about. It's about having those little, like, confronting that that danger on a big or small level, so that you can feel really alive and really human. And that's how we've evolved to live and exist and be.
Mm-hmm. I think that's that phenomenon or experience that you talk about. I feel like I'm a werewolf when I get into like 3 or 4 days into an adventure.
Yeah.
And I do, it's a civilized, I always say that to people. Like it feels like I unzip or take off or like burn off this civilized version.
Yeah.
And then it's just like wild.
I love
it. My fingernails are dirty, which I know that sounds so sensitive, but like I'm filthy and it feels so good.
Yeah.
I'm filthy. My beard is scruffy and I'm only concerned about food, water, and seeing beautiful sights.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I love that feeling.
Isn't it great? and it gets to a point where it's too much after like a week and a half, but it's, I don't think a lot of people get to experience that.
Yeah.
And I know people that listen to this show that don't ever take action.
Yeah.
They listen, they live vicariously through it, but and myself included, it'll be a while, depending on the stage of life, where I feel that again. But it's always this learning experience of, okay, I can't just be on my bike for 6 months now. What can I do to feel that? How quickly can I feel that? How do I either expedite the process or fit it in when I can?
Yep.
And how do I have the motivation to take advantage of those few hours or few days where I can make this happen? I don't know if you struggle with that, but
totally.
I do.
And I was just thinking, it's like, people don't, if you've never experienced something, or if you've only ever experienced what it's like to live in that civilized, contained, safe world, that's the only world you know. And so you don't really know that you're wearing this heavy jacket or this heavy backpack, and so it really takes getting out there, or like we're coming back to, is like just inspiring people that haven't done that to say, hey, there is this other world out there, and check it out.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's
cool.
Awesome. Well, man, I don't know.
We've gone so deep.
I know.
It's amazing.
I know.
I thought we were going to talk about funny stuff, and we've just gone straight down to the bottom. I love it. But that's where I like to be sometimes too. It's felt like we connected and we've had this deep conversation, and it's just beautiful.
I enjoy the deep things as well. You know what I'm saying? Like I feel like a lot of my days pretty surface level with people, and I don't know. It's just there is this sense of urgency in conversation where it's like I don't know if I'll talk to you. How many times in my life. I want to make sure it's a good one.
Yep.
And with this with the podcast especially, it's taught me to jump into that because. I know we're just going all over the place because it's like I'll probably never talk to Tommy Caldwell ever again. So I want to make sure it's like a good conversation, or I'll never talk to this random adventurer in Zimbabwe now, but he's got Skype connection and he's in a little internet cafe.
That's awesome.
Let's talk.
Yeah, and then everyone else gets to share in that. And you know what? That's also for me what's so awesome about travel and exploring the world is that you get those meetings and those chance encounters with people that you may never see again, but you can have really profound encounters with them, and they can be some of the most meaningful friendships that you have, and they may only last a few days, and I'm a big believer in there's a Muslim saying, the road is king, right? Like that, if a stranger knocks on your door, you give them the best bed in the house, you give them the best food in the house. But I also think that the road is also I totally believe that the road is king, but it's also a reflection of who we are, right? So the people that we get confronted with, or the people that are knocking on our door, are a reflection of what we're putting out there. And if we go in and travel and explore the world with an open arms and an open heart, then we get rewarded by the universe sending us some awesome people to hang out with.
Yeah.
And if we go travel the world closed off and worried and afraid and seeing thieves and muggers on every corner, then the world feels that wariness and becomes wary of us too, and we have less connection. And so I think part of exploring the world is trying to do it with that open mind and open heart, and just embrace the diversity of the world, and embrace the different cultures. There's an interesting thing about culture shock, right? Like culture shock is a psychological phenomenon that's based in the reality that most of our communication is nonverbal, right? So you go to a different country, you immediately don't speak the language, but 70% or something like that of our communication is nonverbal. It's based on body language, it's based on intonation, and it's based on kind of unconscious customs and cues that you kind of absorb by growing up in a culture or by living there for a while. But when you're dropped in somewhere completely different that you don't know anything about, you don't even speak the language, but you also don't speak this invisible language either, and then you're really lost. And that's kind of what culture shock is. And I think a lot of people are at some level afraid of travel because it is an uncomfortable place, where our brains are saying to us, hey, I cannot help you here. I can't spot where danger is. I can't spot what to say and what to do. But culture shock can also be a good thing, because culture shock is also, it's realizing that you're kind of dropping that clique of, hey, these are the beliefs that I grew up with. These are the kind of parameters that I grew up with. This is what my culture and my community and my friends and everyone thinks. But when I go somewhere else and all of that's gone and I'm just on my own in a completely new place where I'm the different one, that's a really important thing for people to feel, But a lot of people don't travel and don't have the opportunity to do that. And I think that one of the great benefits of trying to make that happen and do it is to understand that first of all, that whatever we believe and think and do is all fluid and water. Nothing is set in stone, right? Like if we were to travel back in time 100 years, what we believed then is abhorrent to us, many of the things now, right? And 100 years from now, many of the things we believe and think of as normal now will be abhorrent to our great-grandchildren. So whatever we believe and think and do is fluid and is water, and because of that, the great opportunity is that we can also choose what we want to think and what we want to believe. And we might grow up in a culture like America or like England's, but that doesn't mean that we have to continue to live in that box, right? We can evolve beyond that if we so wish, and we can adapt things from other cultures and other ideas that suits us personally. And in doing that, we can make and create more of an authentic self. And when we do that, I think life becomes more meaningful and more grounded and happier. And that's one of the reasons why I love being an explorer of the world, and I love trying to inspire other people to do the same.
Hey man, that's awesome. That's really awesome. Yeah, you can articulate it well, man. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I'm gonna have a hard time titling the episode.
Yeah, I know. I'm sure. It's that time, isn't it?
No. It's I don't know. You don't talk about it all the time. Like, at least I don't. Oh, I do, I guess, on the show, but it can be a while before you really talk about the why behind adventure. Yeah. And just when two people know kind of the experience and can reflect on it and almost reminisce about it, you need that every once in a while.
Absolutely, man.
Great,
I think you just titled it, The Why of Adventure, right?
The Why of Adventure. Yeah, I mean, people love those kinds of episodes too.
Yeah.
So that might be a good title.
Yeah, that's cool.
See.
That's awesome. That's really fun.
But, I know that we probably covered a tenth of what we could, but was there anything else that we didn't share that you really wanted to share?
Gosh, man, there's so many fun stories I would love to tell, but I feel like we've gone down this route and it's been absolutely beautiful and I've loved it, and getting to hang out. I would love to just let people know about my show, if that's cool.
I was going to ask, plug anything you want to plug.
Okay. Yeah, so my new podcast is called Armchair Explorer, and the hook is each episode one of the world's greatest adventurers comes on and tells their best story from the road. I cut everything from with music and beats, so it's all documentary style. So there's no it's not the interview format. It's really just kind of straight to the story itself. And I've been really lucky to get a really incredible first season of guests. I've got everyone from, Tommy Moe, the Olympic gold medal skier, talking about, dropping in some really big sick lines in the backcountry of Alaska, to world leading conservationists talk about trekking with gorillas and trying to help to save them in Rwanda. I've got a guy going down doing the Everest of great white shark dives with the guy who inspired Jaws the movie, and Rodney Fox, which is like, it starts with the most horrific shark attack you'll ever hear in your life, but it ends with you really falling in love with these incredible apex creatures of the deep. And I think that's what it's all about. You know, it's about telling stories, trying to immerse people in adventure and the amazingness of this planet, and then through that, trying to inspire people to see the world in a different way, to see the world through somebody else's eyes. I got an episode with Tima Darian, who's the first Lebanese woman to summit Everest. She's doing the 7 Summit Challenge. She'd be great for this show, actually. And if you want to get connected, and she takes us step by step up Everest. And when she reaches the top, she describes how she's doing this, and it's an incredible ordeal that she went through. And she describes how she's doing this as a statement of freedom for other Arab women in the Middle East, that they can do whatever they want. And then actually I've even got an astronaut talking about doing a spacewalk on the International Space Station.
Whoa.
And it is, he talks about we spoke a lot about wonder, and he talks a lot about one of my favorite subjects, which is called the overview effect. And it's this amazing phenomenon in which many astronauts, like most people that have gone into space and seen the Earth as a whole, come back so profoundly changed. They've actually created a psychological definition for what happens to you if you go into space and see the Earth as a whole. And they call it the overview effect. And he describes how you suddenly realize that we are in this precious blue ball floating in space, and all our petty squabbles seem so insignificant, and that we draw these dividing lines. It becomes so obvious that these lines are just lines that we draw in our minds. There are no nation lines. There are no nationalities from outer space. And it also becomes so apparent how beautiful and precious and alone we are, and how ridiculous that we would not strive to do everything we can to protect our only home. And so
I've never heard of that.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this then.
Yeah.
Do you think, more, mass space travel would do humanity good?
I do actually.
Yeah. To everyone experience that.
Yeah. The reality of it. And you know what? It's happening. Like 2020, NASA announced, that they're now doing plans for private space travel to partly fund the International Space Station. And I love the International Space Station. I wrote a book about the 50 greatest wonders of the world. It's kind of like a guidebook, but it's more of like a kind of in-depth where I try and sort of make you feel what it's like to be at these different wonders. And I actually chose the International Space Station as one of my wonders of the world because it's the most complicated, one of the most complicated machines we've ever built. It's our first colony in space. It's been continuously manned for more than 20 years in space. And it's our first step into the stars. And what's so amazing about it, though, is that we couldn't do it alone. Like, no one country could do it. And it's the only thing we've done as a planet. And it's continually manned by multiple nations, and that's one of the remits of it. And now NASA's announcing plans that to help continue to fund it, they're going to do private space travel. And okay, you've got to be a billionaire to get up there now, but maybe by our grandchildren's time, that it'll be something of a rite of passage where we'll be able to go up into space and see the truth that we are like. As Carl Sagan said, we are a pale blue dot floating in a sunbeam, and that's all we are. And we are alone in the vastness of space, and that makes us incredibly small, but also part of something incomprehensibly large, and that's pretty amazing.
Oh my gosh, yeah. This has been a heck of a conversation.
Can we hug now?
Yeah, for real. We're gonna have to do this again, all right?
Okay, man.
And then next time we'll, for real, let's do this again, and we'll have an outline. We had an outline.
Next time we'll do the pub crawl.
Yeah. Okay. Let's do we'll do the funny one next time.
All right, that sounds good. That sounds awesome.
Well,
I would love to do that.
Aaron, thank you so much for joining in and helping the show reach more people and just have a fresh perspective and also a new format, live. Or face to face. I really have enjoyed this.
Me too, man. It's been amazing. Thanks so much, Mason.
All right, have a good one.
Right on, man.
Right.
Nice one.
First of all, thank you so much for listening. It means the world to us that you choose to listen to the show. If you'd like to help us further, you can leave a review on iTunes, share us with your friends, your family. It goes a long way to growing the show. You can also support us financially through patreon.com/adventuresportspodcast. Link is in the show notes. And also, if you have an idea of who could be a good guest for the show, we're always looking for people to tell their story about the outdoors or adventure. So if you know someone, please reach out. Email us at info@adventuresportspodcast.com. And until then, get out there and have some fun.